So I'm reading from chapter 6, 5 Hindrances. I've already read 1, Sensual Desire, and 2, Ill Will. This is 3, Sloth and Torper. I have told you about 2 of our enemies, but unfortunately we have 3 more. The first 2, of course, you can also call greed and hate, and they are the major unwholesome ingredients of a human being. Not that we don't have non-greed and non-hate also. Non-greed is generosity, and non-hate is loving kindness. It's a matter of cultivating the positive and constantly dropping the negative. While it's only that, it may sound simple, but it's hard work, and unless one is willing to do the work, one cannot follow the Buddha's path. It's the kind of work one has to be willing to do without pause. It has nothing to do with sitting in meditation. This is a full-time job. If we sleep 5, 6, or 7 hours a day, that leaves us with something like 17 hours a day for the work. If we were to confine it to 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening of meditation, it would be impossible for us to make any headway. If we only try to follow the Buddha's way 2 hours a day and the rest of the time forget about it, this is not as uncommon as it may sound, it's not going to relieve our suffering. Our third enemy is called sloth and torpor, or lethargy and drowsiness. And isn't it an enemy of meditation? I dare say most of you have met him already. It's when the mind is not sleeping, but not awake either. There is a twilight zone, where no fruitful work of any kind is being done. As far as one's meditation practice is concerned, it's the same as being asleep, because when one is asleep, one has no way of concentrating. Nor can one concentrate when one is in the twilight zone. The only difference being that one can get out of the twilight zone a little more easily. It isn't quite as deep as sleep, but it has the unfortunate characteristic of returning over and over again, in and out, in and out. This kind of mental state in meditation has its equivalent in daily life, showing up as a lack of direction, which results in a lack of energy. It's such a very common experience that a person with energy stands out as an exception. Yet energy is one of the 7 factors of enlightenment, so you can see how essential an ingredient is for one's mental makeup. Energy arises when one has a clear-cut direction. One knows exactly where one is going and keeps at it. But when the mind has no clear concept of what it's actually trying to accomplish, other than staying alive physically, not much energy is produced. It's not fascinating or interesting, and the subconscious mind knows already that it's a lost cause. Nobody can survive. To use one's strength and direction just for survival is not a fruitful undertaking, and real energy will not arise. On the contrary, one feels bogged down and oppressed by it. The Buddha compared sloth and torpor with being in prison. When one is in prison, in a little cell, there's nothing one can do until somebody opens the door. When the mind is beset by lethargy and drowsiness, lethargy is in the body and drowsiness is in the mind, it is imprisoned to the extent that one can only just rouse up enough energy to do the most necessary things. Most people don't know and don't accept that meditation is a necessity, and so the mind easily gives up. One has to be quite clear about the efficacy of meditation. It's not only necessary to eat, sleep, wash, and dress. These are automatic survival techniques that don't need a lot of energy. They are instinctive. But meditation needs energy. And that can only be aroused if one knows the importance of it. If the mind is quite clear that this is what one really must do. Sometimes we get so fascinated by a book we can stay up half the night and not get tired at all. We just sit there reading. Or we might go to a party and talk to others practically the whole night and not get tired because we're interested and delighted. Meditation has to fascinate one. Then there is no reason for the mind not to be alert. At the beginning of practice, meditation is not delightful at all. It seems bothersome. It seems to be difficult. It has the ingredients of suffering. But when the mind has an understanding of what one is doing, namely watching each moment as it arises, it becomes fascinating to get to know one's own mind. What could be more fascinating? Talking to other people, or just reading a book, is only knowing about others. But if one watches one's own mind, states arising and passing, that is the most fascinating thing one can do, and the most profitable. Once Moggallana went to the Buddha and told him that he had fallen asleep while meditating. What would the Buddha recommend? The Buddha told him that when he felt drowsiness arising, to open his eyes and look at the light, rub his cheeks, pull his earlobes, move his body to get the blood circulation going, and, if necessary, stand up. Anything was better than falling asleep. These are physical ways of overcoming drowsiness, but there are also ways to help the mind to look in the right direction, such as life is uncertain. Death is certain. Right now is the best opportunity for meditation. There are companions. There is guidance. There is food and shelter. The body is healthy and well enough. None of these things are guaranteed. They are results of excellent karma. This is a way of arousing the mind energy. Remember that there is no other moment except this one. The future may seem assured, but that's an illusion. People die every single moment. When we die, which we all will, and are reborn, which we all will be unless we become arahants, then we have to start all over again. We have to learn to walk, to talk, to eat, to go to the toilet, to dress ourselves. We have to go through the whole school system again, get married, have kids, see them get married. Now you've done it all this time. Let's use the time left for what is most important. We've done all the other things. We've already learned to walk and talk, to dress and go to the toilet. We've all been through school. Many of us have had kids. Perhaps they've gotten married. Now is the time. There isn't any better time. If we arouse the energy in our mind for meditation in this way, the energy feeds on itself. It's like having switched on the light. Once it's switched on and the electricity supply is not stopped, the light just keeps on shining. Meditation does not need a lot of energy. It's strange that one should need so much energy when sitting or walking slowly all day. The reason we need so much energy for this is that the mind is constantly trying to do something else, rather than be attentive, so the mind's energy is being used up. If the mind were not throwing up all sorts of ideas and hopes and wishes, there would be no tiredness at all. It doesn't come from that bit of physical action that we do here or any other day in our lives. Yet everybody's dead tired at night. It's the rummaging around in the mind and the constant judging. This I like and this I don't like. This one I'll have and this one I'll get rid of. Which is so tiring. That's why people who do jobs involving only mental activity are as tired, or more so, than people who plant trees or build roads. When the mind has become concentrated and can stay still, it finally gets a rest. Until that happens, we have to arouse it again and again by telling ourselves not to give in. Giving in to our natural inclinations is what everybody else does. That's the instinctive way. Giving in to the desire for comfort, giving in to having it as easy as possible. But the Buddha said, the one who conquers 1,000 times, 1,000 armies, is as nothing compared to one who conquers him or herself. Conquering oneself means conquering one's natural inclinations and not letting the mind get away with them. The wish to meditate should have a good reason behind it. And only then will we arouse the energy to do it. It's not a good enough reason to want some pleasant experiences. That's not a compelling enough reason for meditating, and yet that is foremost in many people's minds. It's very likely to be a disappointment because the pleasant experience isn't going to materialize very soon. The energy for meditation is lost then because one doesn't get what one wants. The meditation becomes suffering like everything else. An unfortunate mind trap of wrong thinking. Meditation has one object only, namely to prepare the mind to get out of all suffering, to prepare it for liberation. It is a means to this end and not for pleasant experiences. Those do happen, and why not? Let us be grateful for them, very grateful that they do happen and that they give us the impetus to continue. But when they don't happen, that doesn't matter either. The mind has to have meditation training in order to become liberated. The Buddha compared sloth and torpor with a pond where the mud has risen to the surface. If there is mud, of course, one can't see one's likeness. There is no clarity. In that twilight state of half sleep, half wakefulness, there is no real awareness. Even in daily living, when the mind says, "I've had enough, it's too strenuous, I don't want to do it, let other people do it, why should I, nobody else is doing it." It's a muddy mind because one can't see a clear way, a clear direction for oneself. A clear direction brings the needed energy. One knows one's path and destination. One can walk toward it with vigor. When one has no destination, there's no fascination, no interest. It's difficult to find a clear destination in life. But the Buddha has shown us the way. He has a clear destination of freedom, of cessation of suffering, of liberation, of nibbana. The fourth 5 hindrance? Restlessness and worry. The next enemy is restlessness and worry, or distraction. Everybody suffers from that, so you can see what a common enemy it is. All 5 enemies are unfortunately very common. Everybody has them to some degree. We need to check which one is our own worst enemy. Which of the 5 comes around most often? They are all sitting inside, waiting for an opportunity, but 1 or 2 of them can appear at the slightest provocation and often overrun us. Those are the ones we need to work on. Restlessness in the mind shows itself in restlessness in the body. The body is the servant. It has no authority of its own. The body without a mind is a corpse. Whatever the body does is being dictated by the mind. Whether we are aware of that or not, most of the time we react so spontaneously and impetuously that we don't even know that the mind has said, "Do that." And we think, "Oh, it's my body." But it can't be my body without my mind. Restlessness in the mind is mostly due to past experiences. Those one has committed and those one has omitted. All the things in one's life that one would have liked to do and didn't, or those one did and would have liked not to do. Restlessness in the mind makes it very difficult to concentrate because it arises again and again. The Buddha compared restlessness in the mind to a pond where there has been a lot of wind, making the waves rise high. When there are waves in one's emotions, one is drowned by them. One can't see clearly. Worry is usually about the future, and most people are extremely good at worrying and often fail to stop and think how useless and absurd it is. Worrying about the future is meaningless. The person who's worrying is not the person who is going to experience the future. There will be change, not just having grown older and hopefully a bit wiser, but a totally different set of circumstances with different thoughts and different feelings. Quite useless to worry about the future. If you have some photos of yourself when you were 4 or 8 or 12 or 15, hold them up against the mirror. Look into the mirror and decide which one you are. Are you the 4-year-old, the 8-year-old, the 15-year-old, the 25-year-old, or the one who is looking into the mirror? Or all of them? If you are all of them, then by now you must be thousands of different people. And that is what one really is, a state of constant change. If the 10-year-old or the 15-year-old had worried about what was going to happen to the 60-year-old, would that have made any sense? You can't remember what the 15-year-old was thinking or worrying about. The same goes for worrying about tomorrow. There's no sense in it, an entirely different person is going to experience it. That doesn't mean one can't plan. Planning and worrying are not the same thing. Planning turns into worrying when one starts thinking whether the plan is going to materialize. Planning is fine. So is deciding to then drop the plan until one can actually put it into action without being concerned with the future results. Worry besets most people and makes the mind tumultuous. It takes one away from the moment, which is the only one in which one can live. Moments spent in worrying are all lost moments. Unless we live in each moment, we are missing life. When we think about the past and worry about the future, we aren't living. We are remembering and projecting. That's not living. Life cannot be thought about. It has to be experienced. That's the only way life can ever mean anything, and experiencing can only happen in each moment. This is one of the skills that meditation teaches us, to live in the moment, which means to live. There is never going to be any peace or happiness or quiet in the heart unless we learn to experience the moment. It will remain a struggle to do the things that one thinks one ought to do, to get to the place where one thinks one ought to go, to keep the things one believes are valuable. A constant struggle without the ease or joy in it. Peace and happiness are not our birthright. They have to be attained with constant effort, and they can be attained if we recognize our enemies and learn to throw them out. Our inner household is our home where uninvited guests appear. Being hospitable, we let them all in. Then we find they have smashed the furniture, stolen the silver, and broken the windows. But instead of closing the door and not letting them in again, the next day they are right back. This is our inner household, besieged by enemies. They create havoc inside, so that we lack peace and harmony and wonder why. We constantly try to find some external reason and say, it's because of that problem I have, or it's because of that relative I have, or it's because of that job I have. There's a long list of reasons. Everybody has a different list, but they all have one thing in common. None of them is real, all are imagined. It's because our internal household is not in order. Our external household can never run smoothly if our internal household doesn't do so. We reflect on the outside exactly what is inside. Restlessness and worry are not only useless, they are foolish. The Buddha said that we are acting foolishly because we don't see reality. But we have a good chance of changing that, haven't we? Restlessness and worry together are called distraction. We are distracted from what we really want to do, namely to meditate. But it doesn't only happen in meditation, it happens in everyday life also. We forget where we put the car keys. We forget what we were going to do because we're distracted, worrying about something. We don't get our work done easily and smoothly because the mind is somewhere else. The Buddha explained 5 different ways of getting rid of distracting thoughts. He gave very telling similes that help us to remember. The first and most gentle way he compared to a carpenter who has put a block of wood into a hole and finds it doesn't fit. He hammers it out again and puts a more fitting one in. This means substitution. If our mind keeps worrying about the future and remembering the past, it is not fitting. There's no happiness, no peace in that. Substitute. Put something in that fits much better. In meditation, put the meditation subject in. In daily living, put what is wholesome and profitable. What is actually happening in that moment has some joy and loving kindness in it. Substitute. The next simile he used was of a young man and a young woman, dressed up very nicely, ready to go out. They get out to the street and realize that each of them has the carcass of a dead animal hanging around their necks. The next simile he used was of a young man and a young woman, dressed up very nicely, ready to go out. They get out to the street and they realize that each of them has the carcass of a dead animal hanging around their necks. They quickly run back inside to clean themselves up because they are ashamed to be seen like that. We feel shamed when our mind is so unruly. We feel ashamed when our mind has all these negativities in it. The Buddha has said shame and fear are the guardians of the world. Without them, the world would be in an even worse state than it is. Most people think that the dirt spots can only be seen on our clothing or on our body, but that's an illusion. The dirt spots on our mind are just as easily seen, not with the physical eye, but with the mental eye. We know when somebody is angry. They don't have to say a word. We know when somebody is egotistical. Their actions and their words betray them. Words and actions come from thought. They must fall in line with what one is thinking. We often don't talk about what somebody has said, but rather what somebody has done, because that is an exact indication of what is going on in his or her mind, good or bad. Remember, the dirt spots on our mind are like dead carcasses hanging around our neck. We can take it off and only come outside when we are nice and clean again. Another simile the Buddha used was to describe distracting thoughts, was of seeing an acquaintance on the other side of the street. Instead of running over to greet him and inquiring about his health and family and getting involved with him, stay on your own side of the street and keep on walking. Pay no attention. When the distracting thoughts arises, don't become involved with it. This is more difficult. To pay no attention means that one is already somewhat in charge of one's mind. It's also a stronger mind action. The first two ways are gentler. To feel ashamed is possible for most people because one has a conscience. But to disregard a thought is more difficult and takes more strength. The next simile used was of a man running along who realizes he feels most uncomfortable and thinks, well, why am I running? I could be walking. So he starts walking. He's still uncomfortable, so he decides to stand still. He is still uncomfortable, so he decides to sit down. Still uncomfortable, he decides to lie down and really be at ease. Recognize the discomfort that comes into the mind and into one's whole being when there are unprofitable, worried, restless, unskillful, and distracting thoughts. It brings no satisfaction, no joy, only the opposite. It keeps one anxious and uneasy. Know this discomfort and realize that nobody else in the world can make us comfortable except ourselves. Nobody can do it. Not the Buddha, nor his enlightened disciples, nor the Pali Canon, not our parents, teachers, or friends. We have to do it ourselves. Unless we make our mind comfortable and joyful, it will never happen. These are 4 methods that we can use in succession, one after the other. If the first one doesn't work, then try the next one, and the next one. If none of them has worked, then one must use suppression. The simile the Buddha used was that of a big, strong man who grabs a tiny, puny man by the neck and drowns him, pushes him under the water, and keeps him underwater by force. In other words, we force those unwholesome thoughts out of the mind and force ourselves not to think of them. This is the last resort, but from it we can see that it's better to suppress than to continue thinking in unwholesome ways. Eventually we can learn to substitute. With the suppression of unwholesome thoughts, we do not allow them to make a groove in the mind. We do not allow the mind to become habituated to that kind of thinking. A mind that is constantly thinking either in a restless, worried, or negative way, or an angry or self-indulgent way, finds it hard to drop the habit. Suppression is better in that case. One antidote the Buddha described for restlessness and distracted thoughts is learning more about the Dhamma, the teaching. When one knows the teaching, one can direct the mind to it often. One remembers the Buddha's words. When one learns more about it, there are clear-cut and decisive answers to any kind of difficulties that arise. The Buddha's answers always lead out of suffering. They always lead out of egoism. But they are not so easy to follow. That's why people often don't wish to follow them, because they don't lead to self-indulgence and physical comfort. The other antidote is to associate with wise and mature people, in addition to having noble friends and noble conversation. This means that one should be careful what friends one chooses. It doesn't mean that one has to give up all of one's old friends, but one must find such friends with whom a wise and uplifting conversation is possible. Again, we see that the people we associate with are very important. Birds of a feather flock together. The kind of people we're with is a direct indication of what we're interested in. Skeptical doubt. The last of our enemies is skeptical doubt. The Buddha compared it to traveling in the desert without provisions and without a map, thereby going around in circles being overrun by bandits and killed. He gave the analogy of a pond covered with weeds. One can hardly see the water at all. Skeptical doubt is traditionally explained as doubting that the Buddha was really enlightened, that the Dhamma was the truth, and that the Sangha has perpetuated the Dhamma correctly. But more damaging for one's personal growth is doubt in one's own abilities, one's own spiritual aptitude. Self-confidence arises when one is able to do the things one sets out to do. In meditation, that means one is actually able to get into the deep absorption. Self-confidence comes up in the second meditative absorption when one knows that one can do what one wants to do with one's mind. One knows that one has become master of the mind to a certain extent. Self-confidence has many facets. It's not aggressive, but is a feeling of certainty that we can rely on ourselves completely. That reliance only becomes possible when we have our emotions under control. We cannot be sure of ourselves when our emotions are untamed. When we get upset, angry, worried, fearful, envious, jealous, greedy. When all these things happen in our mind, there is no security to be found. We're not reliable. And of course, we know that we have no self-confidence. Only when the emotions are brought under control and there's a feeling of rock-bottom security inside oneself that no matter what happens, the reaction is going to be mild and equable, does one feel self-assured. Then one knows one has become a reliable person. This is an important aspect of doubt, because only when we feel confident within ourselves, about ourselves, will we feel confident enough to actually follow the spiritual path to its culmination. Taking one facet of it, trying it out, and then trying another one is much better than doing nothing. But it isn't the whole path. Self-confidence is essential to being able to say, I can really do this. I will follow it until I come to the very end of it. Skeptical doubt arises in people who are unable to love. To commit ourselves to one ideal, to commit ourselves to one path, to commit ourselves to one spiritual activity, we have to be able to give ourselves wholly. If we cannot wholly love, we cannot give ourselves fully. Where the spiritual path is concerned, we have to understand it and love it. Only then can we give ourselves to it wholeheartedly. If we do not give ourselves to the path with our whole being, it's as if one is married yet constantly thinking there might be some better marriage partner to be found. One can't have a very good marriage that way. We have to commit ourselves totally. Also, if we are married and don't understand the other person at all, yet we love them, there isn't going to be a great deal of communication and communion. If we understand the other one, but don't love that person, the marriage is likewise a disaster. The spiritual path is the strongest commitment there is. There isn't any closer union than that, because it takes the whole person and doesn't even need anyone else for completion. We have to understand the path completely and love it from the bottom of our hearts. When we do that, there's no room for skeptical doubt. One doesn't have to ask, was the Buddha really enlightened? That's not a pertinent question. If we follow the path, we're going to find out for ourselves. Total commitment means we can give our whole being. If we can do that, it means we're able to love. People who have a great deal of skeptical doubt are always flitting from one thing to the other. In the West, we call them guru hoppers. That's a favorite pastime for so-called spiritual seekers who can't commit themselves. There might be a better one yet. A simile often used is this. You're looking for water on your farm and you think you might find it in the southeast corner. You dig down 10 feet and there's no water. Then you think, oh, it must be the wrong spot. I'll go to the northwest corner. And then you go to the northwest corner and you start digging again after 10 feet. You give up and think, oh, it must be the wrong place. You do this 10 times and never find any water. But if you had stayed in the first place and dug 10 times, 10 feet, you would certainly have found water. Just keep digging in one spot. Commit yourself fully. To commit ourselves fully to the path of the Buddha is a lifetime occupation. It doesn't mean that we can't keep a house or do many other things, but all of them need to be done with the Dhamma in mind. Then everything we do becomes a teaching and learning situation. The antidotes the Buddha presented for skeptical doubt are the same ones he used for restlessness and worry. Learning more about the Dhamma and associating with wise and mature people. The Buddha said the one who can get rid of these 5 hindrances is one who has finished the work, with nothing more to be done. These 5 hindrances are our passport to samsara, round of rebirth. They are our permanent residence visa. We have to do something about them if we want to get out. Even a slight improvement makes life much easier. And that's what everyone wants, isn't it? Ease. But the ease we want cannot be obtained through physical comfort. The ease we want can only be acquired through mental comfort. And these 5 enemies represent mental discomfort.